So I've become rather fond of the ways we all answer the obligatory, "How are you?" that we exchange as we pass one another in the hallway, or especially when we're greeting one another over the phone. You can actually learn a lot about a person, about how they're actually doing, from how they respond, although not in any transparent way. When somebody says, "Good," that means everything from "I'm doing awesome" to "I'm doing middling" to "I'm so rotten you can't handle it, so please just leave me alone." If they respond "well," then you know you've got a grammar Nazi on your hands. If they respond "busy," then that means they're especially posh. Or they could say "crazy," which I read just yesterday is New Yorker for fine. I have to say, though, my granny's answer is the best one that I've ever heard. 9 times out of 10, and particularly over the phone, my granny will respond, "Oh, I'm barely alive." Now, she always says it in such a way that you can hear her smiling, but there's just something so lovely, so Gothic and Southern Gothic about that response. "I'm barely alive." I love it because it pulls the rug out from under all our posturing around the question, "How are you?" And that's what we're doing for one another. We're posturing. It also recalls to us the utter seriousness of our finite condition, how we're actually doing. Because no matter how well we might be at the moment, we are, as a matter of fact, barely alive. Creatures for whose days are like flowers blown away by the wind, as the 103rd Psalm puts it. A real cheery psalm, Psalm 103. I belabor this because I think we are in a seriously odd place as a culture with regard to how we are, with regard to how we're doing. Poised simultaneously between taking pride and being stressed out. Now admit it, you get a little bit of a libidinal thrill when you tell somebody just how stressed you are, right? I do. It means I'm important. I'm a somebody, which means, in this world anyway, I am stressed. That's one side. The other side is our obsession with wellness. And I think these two go hand in hand. You all don't need for me to tell you that wellness has turned into a veritable industry. I mean books, workshops, retreats, programs, departments, gurus, all poised to help you live your best life now, right now, this moment, by increasing your physical and mental fitness, cultivating better ways to cope with your stress, what have you, all for the low, low cost of $79.99 every quarter. Y'all are familiar with this stuff, I would imagine. In the airport the other day, I saw Barbara Ehrenreich, the author of Nickel and Dimed. I saw Barbara Ehrenreich's newest book. I haven't read it yet, but it's got the most amazing cover. It's a Grim Reaper running on a treadmill. Isn't that fabulous? The title's even better. Natural Causes, an epidemic of wellness, the certainty of dying and killing ourselves to live longer. Now that sounds like a book I want to read. So I checked it out on the Barnes & Noble website yesterday as I was working on this sermon. And much to my bewilderment and delight, here are some of the books it says customers who bought this item also bought. What I wouldn't give to be sitting next to them when they get this shipment. Okay, here are the other books. Happiness is a Choice You Make. Lessons from a Year Among the Oldest Old. Ageless Soul. The Lifelong Journey Towards Meaning and Joy. And this is my favorite, Age Proof. Living Longer Without Running Out of Money or Breaking a Hip. Now that is quite a promise you can make to somebody for buying a book for $24.99. There is no bottom to our appetite for this stuff. Whether it comes in the form of books like these or under the guise of positive psychology, I know these are fighting words back at my home institution, whether it's books or positive psychology or dressed up in Christian garb, and here are the fighting words for this place, like you find in the work of preachers like Joel Osteen, okay? The common theme, in my understanding, is this. First, you are not as happy as you could be. The second is that it's your fault. You're not as happy as you could be, not because of your circumstances, but because of something about yourself. Change yourself. Exercise more, take more time off, meditate regularly, form better habits, interrupt negative thought patterns, etc. Increase your happiness. Now, this is dangerous precisely because it is partly true, and I want for you guys to hear that. It is partly right. Certainly things of this sort do increase our well-being. They certainly have increased mine. I feel better when I do all the things I just said. The lie isn't that they are wholly or even predominantly responsible for our happiness, either this side of heaven or on that side. The trick here is in how happiness is defined. The wellness industry defines happiness solely as an emotion, okay? It's a sustained positive feeling. That's what it means to be happy. That might seem like common sense, but actually, in contrast, the ancient Greek philosophers and the earliest Christian theologians following them thought of happiness in a much thicker, more robust sense. To be truly happy was to flourish, to realize the ends towards which your nature was aimed, to be the sort of creature God made you to be. The acorn flourishes by growing into a tree. The caterpillar by metamorphosing into a butterfly. And the human being by growing into the full stature of Christ, as is put in the 4th chapter of Ephesians. On this understanding, our truest, deepest happiness involves not just a life that merely feels well, but a life that is lived well, and that goes well too. A life that's lived in accordance with God's law, and whose circumstances allow one to live life to the full. And this is what our wellness obsession forgets, that the good life is not only affective or emotional, but moral and circumstantial. That to live a good life is not only to rejoice always, but also to love the law of the Lord and to depend daily on God, who works to deliver us from ruin and bring us into good in his marvelous providence, which we refer to in this morning's collect. I mean, come on. Ours is the God who led the people Israel out of their bondage in Egypt into the land of promise. Thanks be to God that when God saw they were in bondage, he didn't just say to them, breathe in peace, breathe out conflict, and leave them to their own devices. God did something about it and changed their circumstances. One of the things the wellness craze has done is to distract us, actually, from the question of whether there's something not just about ourselves, but about our culture, our institutions, our marketplace, and our way of life that is quite simply unconducive to human flourishing. Is there something about our way of life which makes us miserable? I don't have the answer to that question. What I do know is that we're not even asking it, because most of us have given up on changing it. And that's what I think is the secret undercurrent of the wellness craze. Its affect, its emotion isn't actually happiness, it's despair. Despair that our world and our lives are actually incapable of change. We are stuck with politics like this, societies like this one, careers like ours, and the name of that game is to cope with the brute fact of whatever is, and to anesthetize ourselves to it by any means necessary, physical, spiritual, or increasingly and dangerously chemical. Friends, despair is not a Christian virtue. Coping is not the name of our game. Nor is it desirable to be well adjusted to circumstances no human being has any business being well adjusted to. Beyond this, Christians have always harbored the suspicion that regardless of how great one's life might seem to be going, there's always going to be something about our world as is that's going to put a check on our happiness, that's going to make us long for more than this. and it must be done away with before we can drink the Lord's joy to the full, namely death. And death is what all those self-help books that you find in the local Barnes & Noble are telling you can get the best of. I'm sorry to say, you're in for a disappointment. Christianity ain't going to help you cope, but it can help you convert. Christianity is the worship of Jesus Christ, who drove straight and deep into the muck and mire of all that is awful and unwell in our world and in us, in order that his life and his light might shine forth by increasing degrees in us. For it is the God who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. See, when St. Paul was asked, "How are you?" he answered, "I am afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not driven to despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. Always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in my body." Seems to me that's Christian for "I'm barely alive." Paul speaks as one who recognizes that there is much in his own life. His imprisonment, no doubt. Scholars speculate, perhaps some sort of physical ailment. There's much in his own life that is not as it should be. He speaks as one who has peace in the midst of this, not because he has mastered the art of positive thinking, but because he has hope, real hope in a real God. Hope because he believes that his sufferings are actually Jesus's sufferings, and that as Jesus's, they will yield in time and eternally to the power of the resurrection, just as Jesus's did. And that in the here and now, they are preparing him to bear the eternal weight of glory that at the last day shall be his. Paul believes in grace, not gurus. Do we? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.